Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. It's Fran here, and I'll be covering you through the round of eight kind of quarterfinal selection for the Euro Cup. And what's interesting here, of course, is I think a lot of people have players who are eliminated, and definitely more than three. At this stage of the tournament, you only have three transfers. Therefore, it means that any players you want to replace on top of those three will have to kind of be subtracted from your point total. So that will be minus 4 points for each player that you kind of transfer in on top of that on top of the three that you've chosen. And I think because of the fact that France have got knocked out, Netherlands have been knocked out, Sweden have been knocked out, um, and a few other teams as well, including Germany, you're more than likely going to have a lot of eliminated players on your team, and therefore you'll have to address that in some sort of way. Now, I must admit, because of the family issues that I had in over the course of the weekend, I actually wasn't able to change my team at all. And unfortunately, I left Højbjerg and Spinazzola on the bench. For that reason, I've lost 8 points for free. And I no longer see like a clear avenue for me to actually do extremely well in fantasy in terms of getting a very high point total. So therefore, for that reason, I've chosen to just have a little bit of fun from the quarterfinals onwards and just spend all of my transfer points. But what I would recommend to you actually is to only do more than two transfers that dock you points. So I would only do 5 transfers at a maximum, because the reason is if you, let's say, add in 5 new players to your team, it's more than likely that 1 out of the 5 players on your team will return more than 8 points. And therefore, you've kind of salvaged the 8 points that you've spent putting on those gambles. But if you go minus 16 points, like I actually have this week, just for fun, just for the sake of the channel and just kind of to have fun with some of our viewers as well, it doesn't make sense, right? Because no player really earns more than 10 points, I think, or 12 points. If you're like a defender who had a very strong day, I think, and a strong showing with a clean sheet and a goal. So let's actually go through the picks and let's go through the days and kind of see what's going to happen. And then I'll finally show you my team selection at the very end of the video. So let's look at day one here. Day one is very interesting because, just to remind you, there are still 2 days of play. So that means that you have the opportunity to have keepers, on 2 separate days. And you need to remember this, because if you're trying to replace a keeper, you need to make sure you have a keeper from day one and a keeper from day two. This is probably the only situation where you have to be very mindful of this, because, with defenders, you could have probably most of them playing in day one, and you could replace them with a midfielder or a forward if they do poorly, right? But that's not the same with goalkeepers, so you have to be wary of that. But let's look at day one. Let's look at the game: Sweden versus Spain. Switzerland versus Spain. Switzerland versus Spain is a very interesting game, because I think people's estimations of Switzerland have gone extremely sky high after their winning of France, and I think they played extremely well. They played open football and were able to exploit the half spaces that the French defense created. But do remember as well that this French defense have been very poor all tournament long, with the exception of what Germany had to bring to the table. I think with the exception of, let's say, players like Havertz or Kimmich and Gosens in one game, the German attack was very poor in terms of actually being able to create consistent chances and find avenues to actually attack. And I think, they were kind of gifted a game by Portugal, who set up almost completely to the manner of allowing the wingbacks to dictate the game. But if you press actually and try to make sure that you close the channels between the midfielder pairing of Kroos and Goretzka, or Kroos and Gundogan, of Germany, and you shut down the channels to pass to the wingbacks, then actually Germany's three-back structure is a little bit nonsensical, in the sense that they don't really have the players to play in that structure. I think you need a more dynamic midfield, that is more resistant to press, or at least some center backs who can provide you kind of darting runs forwards to kind of open up avenues of play, and they didn't bring that to the table. And I think for that reason, I think Switzerland is a little bit overestimated. However, I still think 2 picks from Switzerland are very interesting as differentials. I think Seferovic is an aerial threat, and that's actually something that the Spanish defense have been extremely weak against. And for that reason, I think, regardless of the pairing between Laporte and Garcia or Laporte and Pau Torres, I think Seferovic has a potential opportunity to score maybe a goal or even two versus Spain, the same way that he did versus France. And Zuber, I think, if you simply look at the chance creation statistics, has been out of this world for Switzerland. I think when you look at the big games for Switzerland and the key moments, he's actually been someone who has provided a lot of great underlying stats, even in the game versus France, where someone like Shaqiri, I would say, was much more quiet versus France and much more quiet versus a strong team like Italy. So when I think and I kind of envisage how Switzerland are able to win, if they are able to win. It's going to be through these two players who I think will be able to exploit what Spain bring to the table defensively. Now, Spain actually, I think, are a wonderful side, and you know, it's not just because I'm Spanish, but simply the fact that they have created the most expected kind of goals, and they lead chance creation within the tournament. And we saw that kind of in full flight versus Croatia, but also versus Slovakia. And if you also looked at the statistics in the game, um, in versus Poland versus Sweden, I think they did very well there. And of course, you can argue that these Spanish players are not capable of taking their chances, but I think Switzerland are a team that are able to give them those chances. We saw, of course, a lot of fine display from France where they were able to still find chances through. And I'm reminded, for example, of the Mbappe chance that Pogba fed through that could have, for example, led France all the way to the top before they kind of threw away their lead, right? So when I look at Spain, I think Morata actually has the highest amount of chances given out of any player in the Spanish side. You might think, of course, that they're most benefiting from, I think, players like their wingers in Ferran Torres and Pablo Sarabia and Dani Olmo, who have also picked. But Morata is someone I think at this stage of the tournament, given that a lot of key forwards have left, especially the French forwards, Cristiano Ronaldo and Memphis Depay, that Morata now becomes a very interesting option if you need to replace one of these players. And for that reason, I've kept Morata in the team. His budgeting price also means that you could actually move into more elite premiums, such as potentially Sterling if you didn't have him, or at least the Spanish midfielders as well, who are now quite pricey at this stage of the tournament. And for that reason, I think I would prioritize Ferran Torres and Sarabia over Dani Olmo. But what's interesting and why I've rated Dani Olmo as the best pick is because simply I think the Spanish team has shown that even with substitute minutes, they're able to kind of change their style of play and adapt to the substitutes. And the substitutes are very much able to kind of exploit the spaces because Luis Enrique, I think, is very creative with how he sets up versus his teams. He envisaged that I think that pace would be quite detrimental to the Croatian defense. And I think for that reason, Ferran Torres started and had a wonderful game. I think based off of that and also the kind of clinicalness that Ferran Torres brings to the table, he becomes the best midfield pick, followed by Sarabia, who is positionally, I think, the most aware player of the team. He always finds himself in positions to kind of fight for second chances and second knocks, and is also someone who I think is always leading the line in terms of being able to create an assist or a cutback for his teammate. And Dani Olmo is very similar in that regard. If we go to the second game of the day one, we have Belgium versus Italy. This is, of course, a very interesting game because I think a lot of people have players within both Belgium and Italy, and you might think that this is a bit of a risk, but it really isn't because in the next game week you have 5 free transfers, and you're more than likely going to have maybe 4 Italian players or 3 Belgian players. And I don't think this is particularly an issue because you can transfer most of them out. And I think that the other kind of quarterfinal matchups are more likely going to be quite kind on you. I would recommend still, though, if you only have a few Italian and Belgian players already, that you kind of move your assets and move your picks towards day two. Romelu Lukaku, I think, is actually a fantastic option versus Italy because we saw how strong Arnautovic was able to perform versus this Italian defense. And of course, we know that the Italian defense has been extremely strong over the last 2 years, but Romelu Lukaku is a world-class striker, and he possesses similar attributes to Arnautovic, but of course much better in terms of his hold-up play and his ability to kind of, I think, take chances perhaps a little bit better when he's one-on-one or when he has his back towards players. And I think Lukaku becomes a fantastic option here, especially if Chiellini is still out. Thorgan Hazard, once again, I think suddenly becomes another best pick because I still think that the Italian defense kind of lets a little bit of space in behind. And although they play deeper with their right back, I still think that what we saw from Alaba in the match versus Austria is something similar to what Hazard will be. What happens with the Belgium kind of left side, left flank is that there's a lot of interplay with the left wing back and kind of the inside forward who plays for the team. And that could be someone like Mertens and Hazard constantly interchanging their positions. And that allows Hazard to kind of find free pockets of space the same way he did when he kind of scored that goal versus Portugal, which I kind of predicted in the previous video when I said that he would be a great differential to exploit that Portuguese defense. Munier once again becomes a good pick because I think the way we've seen teams defend versus Italy, especially with kind of sending someone to man mark, someone like Immobile, and then also kind of having a very compact defense is something that Belgium does bring to the table. And I think Italy don't have the same options to kind of exploit like pacey wingers, even though they do have Insigne and potentially Chiesa, and I'll talk about Chiesa in just a second. But I do think Meunier is someone who bombs forward for Belgium and becomes that kind of right wing threat in place of Castagna. And he's been fantastic, I think, all tournament long in terms of actually being able to create chances for the side. And for that reason, I think Meunier becomes a good pick, especially since there are much more limited amounts of defenders left in the tournament. And you probably have to replace defenders regardless. But Federico Chiesa is once again another great pick. And I think he actually will have the nod over Berardi. Now, of course, I suggested to pick Berardi due to budgetary kind of restraints in the previous week. But I think it's now gone to a place where if you're looking to actually replace a player that's not Berardi, of course, like someone who's been eliminated, then Chiesa becomes a fantastic pick at his price, right? That allows you to maybe go for a premium forward in replace of someone else, or maybe another premium midfielder. I think Chiesa has shown that he's very direct. He's a traditional winger. He has a different weak foot to in Berardi. So instead of looking to cut inside, he actually draws the ball down the line, and he kind of exploits the pace or lack of pace of the enemy defender. His kind of matchup will be Vertonghen and a mix of Hazard, who will be dropping back as well. Thorgan Hazard, that is. But I think Federico Chiesa has plenty of chances to actually score, and I think that kind of simulation that we saw between Spinazzola and Chiesa could be something that we can see Belgium be exploited by. The same thing with Lorenzo Insigne. I think if you watch the Portuguese game, there were definitely some gaps when the Belgian defense were extremely narrow, and therefore I think Insigne has the opportunity as an inside forward and someone who actually kind of presses almost as a forward for this team. Means that he actually has the opportunity to run in behind and potentially actually score a one-on-one chance, in my opinion. Spinazzola, I think we've seen, has been class all tournament, and he is the one who is given preferential treatment in terms of being able to move forward and having the license to do so. So I like Spinazzola, and I've always liked Spinazzola, and I think he remains one of those best picks. I'm going to drop Ciro Immobile, I think, a little bit in priority because I think he's been limited in the last two games to be someone who drops further back for the team and actually can create chances through his long shots and his ability to kind of play make sometimes. But I think he has been marked very heavily in this tournament, and I expect the same for Malen to actually kind of operate for Immobile. So I think the other forwards are more interesting here in that they probably have more chances to score, and for that reason he becomes just a differential for me. The same with Kevin De Bruyne, simply due to injury concerns. He's still in my team from the previous week, and I'm not going to change him out. But I think, of course, if you're looking to change into Kevin De Bruyne, please be wary of that because, of course, he has injury concerns. Now let's move on to day two. Czech Republic versus Denmark is an extremely exciting game, and I think the reason why this is the case is because Denmark have shown tremendous improvements in terms of their attacking press and their attacking build-up whilst moving into a back three. However, we saw Czech Republic do extremely admirably versus the back three when they were kind of coupled against Netherlands, right? And I think we've seen over the course of the tournament that they have been a very composed side in terms of defense, and they've only conceded 2 goals so far in this tournament, which means that they've become a very interesting side versus the Denmark side who've, I think, built on their attack and started to kind of find structures of play on that left-hand side. And I think when we talk about that left-hand side for Denmark, I mean, it comes down to the work ethic of Damsgaard and Mæhle, who have been creating these beautiful triangles as well with someone like Dolberg, who drops deep at times. And for that reason, I think Damsgaard and Mæhle are the kind of priority picks. Damsgaard is, of course, a budgetary option. He might allow you to actually get some better picks within your team if you're replacing players this week. And Mæhle should already have been in your team last week, but simply put, he is one of the better attacking fullbacks in this tournament. And regardless of whether or not he keeps a clean sheet, I think he is usually almost pegged for an attacking return, especially in this Denmark side who press very hard and very well too. Dolberg got very limited minutes in match day 3 and then actually showed a fantastic performance getting the start in the round of 16. And I expect Dolberg could be a great differential pick versus the Czech Republic. But as I say, Czech Republic probably do have the opportunity to actually get a clean sheet, given the fact that they have a very, I think, solid and structured defense and have shown experience to kind of play versus a back three. And I think for that reason, Soufal becomes an interesting differential as well. I've kept Højbjerg here just for reference because, Højbjerg is someone that I also recommended in the previous week, and he's provided assists from deep for this Danish side. But I think since moving to that back three as well, I've noticed that he has dropped somewhat deeper into the field. And I think for that reason, Højbjerg becomes a lesser priority pick than someone like Damsgaard. And the only player that I've kind of left out here, of course, is the menace that is Patrik Schick. Patrik Schick has, of course, had a wonderful tournament so far, and I think he is that kind of talismanic player for Czech Republic simply. I think if they win he's almost pegged to score, and that has been the case for the rest of the whole tournament so far. And I think, Schick's kind of chance creation has been so wonderful in terms of his ability to actually utilize his pace and carry the ball forwards almost by himself at Czech Republic. And I think his ability to hold up the play means he is a fantastic pick for Czech Republic to actually kind of suddenly move on the counter and play off of him. And I think, yes, he becomes quintessential for the side if you want and you believe that Czech Republic are going to have a good result. Now, in terms of England versus Ukraine, which I think, of course, is the matchup that people are looking to get the most of their assets from, simply put, I think Ukraine have kind of been run to the ground versus Sweden. I think I wouldn't say they were lucky to go through because Forsberg didn't really take his chances. He had the post twice, the crossbar once, the post once, versus Ukraine, and simply Ukraine were the better team in extra time. Due to the red card as well. But I think they've run a lot of hard yards, and this team might have to meet their tournament end versus, I think, an English team that have found a very solid defensive structure, regardless of whether they play the three back or the four, or a four back. And I think for that reason, I think you have to go with the tried and trusted options that we've seen in terms of the attacking display for England, and then also defensively for England. I think now we've seen a lot more games from Shaw, and I think we can say he's probably nailed on to start. He's a key chance creator for that side, and I really struggle to think that Southgate would drop him, especially after he had a wonderful game today versus Germany. And I think Shaw becomes a kind of must-have pick at this stage in the tournament, especially since there are much more limited defenders, and you expect a lot of these teams to actually be conceding goals. Pickford as well becomes one of the priority keeper picks for this tournament too. And, might I add, also Harry Kane has suddenly become once again a fantastic forward option. I think he finally had the best game of his tournament so far in terms of how he contributed to build up. Yes, he missed a chance and was also kind of dealt very handily, I think, by Hummels. But I think the Ukraine defense do present a lower quality defense than the German kind of center backs. And I think Kane will have a slightly better game. And the same with Raheem Sterling, who's had a fantastic tournament so far and is simply undeniable at this point. Safe picks, I think, become the centre back pairing for England, who now seem to be kind of John Stones and Maguire now that he's fit. And I think for that reasons, the only differential that you might have is Jack Grealish, because I think there is potential that England move back to a back four and play a potentially more expansive game. But I think even still today, we saw fantastic dividends from Jack Grealish on the left and Sterling on the right, even in that kind of three-back structure. So I think for that reason, Jack Grealish might not get the start, but I think even a substitute appearance becomes a very interesting pick if you're looking for some sort of differential option. Now, to kind of conclude on the video, I'm just going to show you just for fun my initial team selection. Now, remember that, as I said, I had family issues. I wasn't able to actually kind of change my team in preparation of round of 16. I didn't change my team before the deadline. I left 8 points on the table, and for that reason, I kind of feel like my fantasy tournament is over, but it's not over for you, and that's the whole point of the video, right? I think I want to show a team selection that I have now that is a bit for fun because I am Spanish, and I think one of my best friends, Mehdi, who also runs the channel, is Belgian. So I've gone for more Spanish and Belgian picks. But if you wanted an honest opinion from me, I would recommend trying to get 4 English assets. I think they have a strong kind of a potential run in the tournament. The other side of the bracket is extremely difficult. You might want to stack up on Spain players though, because I think they have a relatively easier match compared to Belgium, Italy. And I think for that reason, you want to kind of make up your team looking for a set Spanish picks, as a secondary to the English picks being the priority. Now, as you can see, I don't have Harry Kane or Sterling, but I would 100% recommend them having being kind of replacement picks for your team. Definitely maybe someone over someone like Lukaku. But I've gone for this kind of team selection here, and as you know, the players that kind of were in my team from the previous week were Immobile, De Bruyne, Berardi, Alba, Mela, Donnarumma, Højbjerg, Spinazzola, and I've kind of brought in players like Munier, Pickford, due to the kind of beauty, I think, of the English clean sheet potential. And I've brought in 3 Spanish players in terms of Morata, Torres, and Sarabia, simply because I'm going to support my home nation. But please refer to the picks earlier on. There's a lot of kind of detailed analysis that I've kind of made to make sure that you kind of have the right picks. I don't recommend changing more than 5 players. Going -8 is a huge risk to take. Going -16, which is what I did, is a risk you should never take as well. We'll see how that pays off for me. Probably not well. I think England are going to do extremely well. Make sure you have an English forward or an English midfielder, that being Kane and someone else. And also kind of stock up on that English defense if you haven't already. And, once again, if you have the opportunity to kind of like and subscribe, please do. If you have any comments about team selection or kind of replacement picks, comment them below and I'll respond to your queries as soon as possible. And I hope you guys have the best of luck in the round of 8 and going forwards. We'll be making a live stream to kind of make up for last week. So I'll see you guys around and take care.